Off the Podium. I have a friend. I haven't seen Yaniv in a long time, but Yaniv Attar is with us. Yaniv, welcome to Off the Podium.
Thanks for having me, Tigran.
I learned that you're a guitarist, and you know what made me think about this? I'm trying to figure out what other guitarist I know that's also a conductor.
You know, there are not many guitarists that I know that are conductors. I know one conductor in Israel, Doron Salomon, who was a guitarist as well. There is a guitarist from Thailand, I think, and I forgot his name. And he was the winner of many years ago the Mazel conducting competition.
Wow.
I think it was the first one and the only one. And he was a guitarist. And other than that, I don't really know many guitarists who are conductors. Of course, Berlioz used to play guitar. So, but yeah, there are not many guitarists. But you know, Berlioz used to call the guitar "mon petit orchestre." It's so funny because guitar is such an intimate instrument, and an orchestra is the most powerful force of nature that you can, find. So I find it interesting that it's that I can have these incredible contrasts in my life: the guitar and the orchestra.
I read about your history and your background as a guitarist. You are and were a successful guitar player. What made you switch to conducting? What inspired you to take the baton?
Well, to be honest, I was drawn to conducting from a very early age. It started when my sister was studying film in Israel, and she had to analyze the soundtrack of the movie Clockwork Orange, which features a lot of Beethoven Ninth Symphony. And I got so obsessed with that piece, and it made me fall in love with orchestral music. So I always had that in the back of my mind, but guitar was my instrument at the time, so I knew I wanted to be very accomplished on an instrument before I can be a conductor. I think it's important as a conductor to be able to tell other people what you want them to do. You have to be an accomplished musician yourself, I feel. You have to, be proficient at least in one instrument. So, since guitar was my instrument, that was the one that I had to do with. But I've always, when I was studying in London guitar and when I was at Juilliard, I always did it parallel with conducting. So until at some point they had to be separated, unfortunately.
But you still play some. You still play. You're still active.
Once I moved to McGill and decided to do my doctorate, the guitar sat in the case for maybe 5 years. I did not open it, and it was so funny because just before I put it in the guitar for that long, I mean, I didn't have plans to put it there for that long. I just won a big competition in Israel. I got the award. I flew back to Montreal, started rehearsals for my next concert, and it happened that 5 years I did not touch the instrument. And I started to take the instrument back to start playing again, actually, after I left my first job in Alabama, where I was assistant conductor of the Alabama Symphony. And that's when I started to play back. And yeah, but it was a very long break. I don't practice the way I used to, obviously. When I was at Juilliard, I used to do 7-8 hours every day.
Wow.
Yeah, wow. I mean, this was my get up in the morning. This is what you do till night. But now with conducting and 3 orchestras and kids, and there's not really time to do this. So I try as much as I can. I don't play solo very much, but I do try to play a lot of chamber music with other members of the orchestra and perform in fundraising events and things like that.
Yeah, so you mentioned kids. You mentioned a couple of things, and I want to get to each one of those. But kids and family and all the things that you're doing, how do you balance career and family life and maybe some hobbies that you might have? How do you balance those things?
On the one hand, it's very difficult to balance all these. On the other hand, it's very easy, and I'll tell you why. Being a conductor means I work from home most of the time. Until I go to the orchestra that I conduct, I'm in this space. Actually, this is my study, and I study scores all day. But because of that kind of a job, I have also a lot of flexibility.
Yeah.
So my wife, the teacher, she goes to work every day and come home. Not now, obviously, with this COVID-19, but on
Yeah.
normal days. So I work when the kids are in school, and then I pick them up, and then later when my wife comes home, I can go back and finish whatever I have to do. It's the hard thing is when I travel, and when I'm here in Bellingham working with the Bellingham Symphony, it's fine. But when I go to Pennsylvania to work with the Pennsylvania Chamber Orchestra, or even when I go to work with Sinfonietta in Tacoma or guest conducting anywhere, then it gets harder because my wife has a lot more to do because
Yeah.
I'm at home all day. And I miss my kids terribly. And I'm thankful for FaceTime and all that. To be honest, now that they're in such an early age, I'm happy to have my orchestra here. I'm not crazy about traveling because I want to be here for them because time goes by so fast and I'm never going to get this time back. I found since I had kids to be less career driven than I used to be before.
Interesting. Going back to something you mentioned earlier, Alabama Symphony assistant conductor. For those young conductors watching, what does it take to be an assistant conductor? What's the day to day, maybe, and what did you do to even get to that point with the professional orchestra?
When I was in my last year at McGill, there were auditions for assistant conductor of the Alabama Symphony. I knew nothing about Birmingham. I've never been in the South before, but I went there to take the audition, and then I moved to Birmingham. So as assistant conductor, in some orchestras, assistant conductors do all the education, outreach concerts, cover for all the masterwork, which means they have to learn the scores and be ready, and also do the pops concert. The Alabama Symphony, though, they have a principal pops conductor, so I didn't have to do all those concerts. But I took the orchestra to schools. I had to program education concerts, write the script, make sure that it's engaging and the kids could connect to, and took the orchestra to some concerts with different communities, sometimes repeated masterworks, which was very good for me because then I could do major pieces and then cover for the music director. And I would send the music director or any guest conductor notes from rehearsals of things that from the hall you couldn't hear or didn't work very well, because sometimes and you as a conductor, you stand on the podium and you conduct, and sometimes it's the worst place to be, and
Yeah.
you need somebody back there to judge whether things can come through. So I would prepare notes, and I had to be there in all the rehearsals. It's a very demanding work, and assistant conductor, it's also difficult because many times you conduct concerts in the most challenging halls. Many times I conducted the orchestra in school gymnasiums, and you never have a rehearsal in that hall. You just go there and play. And so these are challenging and acoustically challenging, and sometimes the orchestra doesn't fit in a certain way, so you have to rearrange them. So there's a lot of challenges, and finding the right repertoire to connect with children and or with a community. So it's definitely challenging. It's very different than being a music director of an orchestra.
So you conduct three. You work with three orchestras, three different organizations. Two of them are professional orchestras. One of them is a very, very high level community orchestra. Is Bellingham Symphony still a community orchestra?
I think it's called now semi-professional because of the amount of people that are getting paid, and there are even some talks of maybe in the future go to more condensed schedule, which is a trend that I'm seeing a lot with community orchestras right now. So I would, yeah, you can call it community slash semi-professional.
Yeah. So I wanted to know what some of the challenges might be working with professional orchestras as opposed to community orchestras and vice versa. What have you experienced? What would you maybe give advice to some conductors and musicians who work with the different levels?
I think even today, whether it's a community orchestra or a professional orchestra, you can find actually sometimes very similar challenges because no matter what the organization is, unless you conduct, the Berlin Philharmonic or the Philadelphia Orchestra, you always going to have varied level of musicians and personalities in it, and you always need to find the right balance to be able to inspire people and make them do their best. With a community, even we have a much larger amount of time to prepare a concert. And I think that can be a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing because you have much more time for the orchestra, not just to learn the music, but to digest the music and prepare it well. They live with the music for a long time. And I think it brings a very uh, unique level of preparation that with a professional orchestra, you don't get that. You know, when I go to Pennsylvania, I go and I rehearse Thursday, Friday, Saturday, concert is Sunday. So even with professional group, they have much less time to live with the music. And I think that's a disadvantage actually for professional groups because, you know, they prepare something very quickly. They don't get to live with their repertoire. Can you imagine you as any soloist who has to prepare a recital, learning the whole recital program in, let's say, a span of 2 and 3 weeks, performing it, and then not touching it again? When you go see a great soloist, what's great about what they're doing and what about the music making that they're making is that they have practiced this music and lived with this music for such a long time to have such a profound understanding in music creativity that you don't get when you with a group and you're working on it for such a short time and then it's gone. I think that's the advantage in a way and then disadvantage in the other way. But you know, at the end of the day, I try to create for both these kind of experiences the same end result. Great musical product that I can be proud of, that they can be proud of, and that the audience could be enjoying and be inspired by.
Project that you're passionate about, Harmony from Discord. I want to hear about that and your thoughts.
So this is I don't know, about 5 years ago or so, or 6 years ago. I was sitting with my executive director of the orchestra of back then, Tom Mays. We were sitting in my living room, and I was telling them about one of my doctoral topics at McGill, and it was music by composers who died in the Holocaust. And I said I told him I would love to do a concert with this music, and he said, "Okay, tell me what this concert will look like." And I tried to list the pieces that I would love to perform in that concert, and I listed about 40 works. So and he said, "Well, we can't fit that in one concert, obviously." So we decided to make it a multi-year series, and so far we are in our fifth year going on. And basically, the series meant to give voice to composers who lived and wrote music under oppression, mainly now music by Jewish composers from the Holocaust period, but we're extending it after next year. We extend it to all composers who are and still are writing under oppression, and there are so many minority groups, African American composers, women composers, refugees, you name it, you know. So it will be extended beyond the Jewish element.
Yeah. So with that said, it brings me to the programming idea and how you program a season. And I know this is a big topic, but what do you consider when programming? What how much time you take to program? Because as you said, there's a lot of thought in programming music by minority composers or music by composers that were maybe around 200 years ago but are not performed now. So how do you come up with a program for the season, and what do you consider when putting that into this season programming?
You know, it's interesting you asked me this question because I'm involved in programming with 3 orchestras, and each one of those orchestras has a completely different process of programming the music. I'll start with the Bellingham Symphony. So the way we program the season then is we have an artistic advisory committee, and basically I come up with a draft of what I think the season should be like. And then on this committee, we have the executive director, we have the marketing person, we have personnel manager, we have a board member. So I get all these points of view of things. Is this going to be marketable? Is this program is going to be too expensive? All these things, and we even have another conductor, the conductor from Western, Ryan Dudenbostel, who's on it, which is great because it gives me another conductor perspective. And I have to say, being on that committee now for 6, 7 years with the Bellingham Symphony, it really helped me to become a better programmer. It wasn't just I want to do these pieces and that's it. And in terms of what I think should be on that program, I always think of a season as, if I look at it as a big meal that needs to be very balanced. So I'm trying to do not all Russian romantic or German music
Yeah.
or all just blockbusters. I want to have of different nationalities, of different periods. When I look even at concertos for the season, I'm trying not to have all violin concertos. I
Yeah.
always like to have one of each of the major instrument and then one exotic or
Yeah.
out of the ordinary instrument. It's people always like to hear the cello concertos, the piano concertos, and the violin concertos.
Yeah.
But one year I programmed the Bruch double for clarinet and viola. One year I would do a guitar. So this kind of thing, sometimes including the choir. I think every 2 years I'm trying to collaborate with one of the choirs in Bellingham. So the season is balanced with the repertoire of known and unknown works, with instruments. So all this come into consideration. In Pennsylvania, it's very different because in Pennsylvania they give me a carte blanche. Program the season. The orchestra doesn't want to get involved, but I try. In the last 2 years, I try to email the orchestra and say, "I'm programming next season. Why don't you give me suggestions, things that you would like to do?" And usually, I get some, same suggestion from a few people, and then I say, "Okay, this is the work that I should do. This is the work," and I try like a puzzle to create that kind of thing. With Northwest Sinfonietta is a little bit different because this is a very unique orchestra. They don't have a music director. They have artistic partners. They switched to that model a few years ago, and they started with 3 artistic partners, and they each come and do a couple of concerts. And now there's only 2. There's the main artistic partner, which is David Lockington, and then I come. So this year, I was supposed to have 2 concerts with them. I've had one so far. One has been rescheduled because of the COVID-19, but I send my suggestion. They also have kind of an artistic vision committee, and then we discuss the program back and forth, which is a little harder because then you have to, with 2 conductors, you have to make sure that the season is balanced, is interesting, it's good for marketing, and all these kind of aspects.
That's amazing. And especially makes it hard when you're working with more than just one ensemble. It's like you really have to switch gears when thinking about the different ensembles. So, question from someone, not me, someone who saw that I'm gonna have you on, and that person said, "How do we continue to be musicians without an orchestra or an ensemble?"
This is really hard for us. I mean, these are hard times, not just financially for musicians and orchestras, but I think emotionally as well. I mean, money aside, I had so many concerts canceled between Bellingham, um, Pennsylvania, Northwest Sinfonietta. Um, it's what we do. We're performing musicians, and what's so hard is, I think, for conductors is our music making is dependent on other people making sound, as opposed to a violist playing at home or a flutist playing their instrument. So I miss being with other musicians and making this music. I usually study scores with a piano just because I feel as a conductor that I need to touch every note in the score to connect to my brain. It's just the way I work. But I found that since this thing started, I am practicing guitar much more than I ever did. I'm planning to do some, those duets that people do, recording it separately and putting it together so I can play some kind of chamber music. But this is just to keep me sane. This is definitely challenging, and I cannot wait for the time where, as an orchestra, we can all be on one stage to work on music, and then, of course, that we can share them with our audience.
It's really tough. It's still on the COVID-19. We of course hope for positive things to come out, hopefully after this experience. But I personally sometimes worry that with all of this happening and what it could do to people as far as losing jobs and other things, I always worry that arts might just have it might get the negative impact of all of this. So what are your thoughts? Maybe some things that you thought about that are negative that could come out of this, or maybe with the hope for the future that it will have a positive impact on the arts. Have you had these thoughts, and what are your thoughts?
Let me start with the negative,
Yeah,
just so we can be positive. I think the thing that worries me most is if this goes on for a long time, I think it might change the desire of people to be in a space,
yeah,
to come to concert. That's one. I mean, are people going to want to come to concert? Even when, let's say, next season everything seemed to be okay, are people still going to be worried? Are people going to come and want to listen to music in a concert hall and be in such close proximity? Something else that we have to also take into account, especially in this country where orchestras are dependent on public donations. It's not state funded like in Europe. And with the stock market taking such a hit, are people going to have the same generosity and be able to donate to orchestras? I think orchestra is going to be really impacted. Thinking about next season, I mean, we don't know how this thing's going to last. We need to have some plan Bs of
yeah,
if we can have a specific concert. Do you do live stream? Do you do recordings? Do you have to have plan B for soloists unable to travel? I think it creates a lot of logistic challenges, financial challenges, and now I feel like we're still in this kind of a war zone with a big cloud that we can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. And
yeah,
I think that's the hardest thing, not knowing. On the positive side, I'm looking at social media a lot, and I see so many musicians and artists coming together,
yeah,
playing duets, either playing ensembles, posting their music. I think people at this time understand more than any other time the importance of music in our lives, and music as a tool to connect people. I think people miss it dearly, and my hope that when this is all over, people will appreciate the arts and the ability to congregate way more than before. I mean, we've taken it for granted until now. This is the first time in my life that I'm experiencing this social distancing thing. Um, so I think life's going to be very different,
yeah,
and I also think orchestras are going to think differently about social media and about streaming concerts and reaching audiences that they have never reached before. Until today, there are still many orchestras where this is very problematic to live
yeah,
stream concerts because of union rules and all that thing. This needs to change
yeah.
because we see that, in today's age, it has to be part of our reality.
Yeah, those are all good points. I do want to go back and ask you a question. This is something I think about a lot, and I know other conductors do as well. What is the meaning of a successful conductor? I mean, if you don't end up conducting the greatest orchestras in the world, are you still a successful conductor? What does it mean to be successful for you?
I'll never forget years ago, like 15 years ago, I took a master class, conducting master class with Kurt Mazur. It was at Manhattan School of Music. One of the first thing he told us was, don't think that only conducting the New York Philharmonic means success. And I think, you know, working with an ensemble, it doesn't really matter on what level you're conducting. If you're able to work with musicians and get them from point A to point B, wherever that A and B is, doesn't matter. If you're able to inspire them, change their sound, make them make music together, and share it with an appreciative audience, that means you're a successful conductor. It
Wow.
doesn't matter on what level it is. I've conducted community orchestras, I, and sometimes I had much more rewarding experience than working with a professional group, and vice versa. If the music making is there, if people are giving 150%, I don't think the level of where you are makes a difference. But I think for me, the most rewarding part of it is if I'm able to make change, positive change, and again, influence the sound, create music, get everybody to listen, make a performance and a meaningful performance with an interpretation I can stand behind. That's to me being a successful conductor.
This is one of my favorite questions. Advice to young musicians or a young conductor, if you want to be more specific.
I think I get a lot of emails sometimes from people who are young musicians who want to become a conductor, and then they say, what's your advice for me? And even I used to think back in the days that you have to get into the best conducting program if you want to be a conductor and all this. And I don't think it's true anymore. I really don't think it's true. I think the most important thing that you need to acquire to become a conductor and to start your conducting path, there are two things. One of them is to go to as many rehearsals as you can of good conductors and bad conductors.
Yeah.
Any rehearsals you can go. See what works, see what doesn't work. It's really important. The other thing is experience. I see a lot of people who go to schools for example, in Europe, there are many schools who have their conducting lessons with pianos, which I think is awful. I would rather conduct a very bad orchestra, but it's an orchestra that I can really test what I'm doing, as opposed to working with piano. I just don't think it's a realistic experience. Try to get experience, any experience you can have, conducting band, conducting choir, whatever you can. Conduct human beings, and that experience is more important than any school you go to. When you go stand in front of an orchestra that doesn't know you, they don't care if you went to Curtis or Juilliard. I mean, they want you to do your job. They want you to know your score. They want you to be an inspiring musician, to know what you want and know how to ask for it kindly. These are the things you need to develop. So watching rehearsals, learning your scores all the time, and getting as much experience. Conducting is like being a pilot, and you need to acquire all those flying hours to be able to fly that plane. Exactly the same. And with this profession, you can never have enough experience. Even when you're 90.
We're about to end here, but I want to know. I know what I know about you, and what probably most people know. You have a family, a beautiful family, and you play guitar. You're a guitarist, and you're a conductor. Is there something that we don't know about you that you would like to share with us?
You know, I don't know that I have. I mean, between kids and work and family, not. But I would say one thing, and this is it never used to be before I moved here to Bellingham. I used to be a city guy and all that, but since I moved to beautiful Bellingham, I really started to enjoy and appreciate nature and hiking, and I just feel so fortunate to live in this part of the country, in this part of the world. I almost feel I live in a bubble.
Yeah.
So this is something that I think being in nature feeds now a lot into my music making. It's just my window is overlooking the bay, and it's just a very pleasant way to learn scores.
I've been fortunate enough to come to Bellingham because I was working with you as your assistant conductor for a couple of years there, and it was a great time because you're an inspiring musician. You're very thoughtful, and you gave me a lot of opportunities, not even knowing me. So it
Well,
was great.
to me, the greatest thing is to see how much you have gone since you left here, and seeing your career grows. That to me is the most rewarding thing, and I'm so proud of you, Tigran.
Thank you. And I've learned a lot from you. Actually, one thing I'll never forget, and I hope I can share this, is when Gil Shaham, world famous musician who came to town, and it was a very last minute thing and not much rehearsal time. And the way you handled the rehearsal, that was very inspiring. Actually, that was a really scary thing for me just watching you, because I'm like, man, I really hope this comes together really well, because there's Yaniv, who I like, and nice person and a friend, and this big world famous musician, and short time to rehearse, and you put it together so nicely, and it was a fantastic concert.
We had a rehearsal from 12 to 1, and the concert was at 3. It was Brahms Violin Concerto.
That was great. That was fun. So thanks, Yaniv. Did we miss anything? Do you want to say anything else?
No, I really appreciate you having me, and I love listening to your podcast. You're doing great, Tigran.
Thank you. Have a beautiful day, Yaniv.
Thanks so much.